Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'll give it a second for people to filter in. Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you joining us from Points West. My name is Rachel Small. I'm the Director of Publicity at Astra Publishing House, and I am very excited to introduce the Astra House Spring 2026 Fiction Preview. Today, we'll hear from two brilliant authors embarking on the publication of their second novels about family and fanatical passion. First, we'll hear from Monica Datta about Nebraska, an epic and erudite 20 years in the making. Then Ashton Politnoff will talk about Dad Had a Bad Day, the wickedly funny and moving tale of a sad dad who secretly rekindles his childhood passion for tennis. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping before we begin. As a reminder, this is a webinar, and thus only our authors and editors will have mics and cameras on. The chat and Q&A are open, so feel free to ask questions there, and if we have time, we'll try to answer them. And now it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our first author-editor pair. Monica Datta is the author of Thieving Sun. Her writing has appeared in The Believer, Conjunctions, The New Inquiry, and many other journals. She has received funding from the Divided City Mellon Foundation, the Faber Arts, Sciences, and Humanities Residency of Catalonia, the Fine Arts Work Center, the Kimmel Harding Center for the Arts, Kundiman and OPERA America. Her new novel, Nebraska, has been dubbed astonishing, a marvel of storytelling by Shobha Rao, who goes on to say that it is made of the stuff of great and uncompromising ambition. It will be published on June 23rd and was acquired by Ben Schrank. Ben is the publisher of Astra House and COO of Astra Publishing House. He was previously president and publisher at Henry Holt and Company, and prior to that, president and publisher of Razorbill, an imprint of Penguin Random House. At Astra, Ben has acquired fiction and nonfiction, including Thieving Sun and Nebraska by Monica Datta, The Bathysphere Book by Brad Fox, Seeing by Chai Jing, Lookout by Edward McPherson, and books by Royal Society of Literature Encore Award winner Daisy Hildyard, August Prize winner Lydia Sandgren, and 20th century renowned Chinese novelist and essayist Wang Xiaobo. And now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Monica to read briefly from Nebraska. You're muted, Monica.
I'm so sorry. Thanks so much, Rachel. The ice had formed thick fractal branches on the office window, protecting Anna Chatterjee from the street lamp's stinging diamond glare. She had been working all day outdoors in the same swaddling polyester trousers that scraped her sore legs, tessellated and fissured from the Nebraska winter winds, thick nylon sock impersonations 3 shades too light for her skin that offered no protection from the cold, the fibers catching in the Velcro cracks of her feet, and some kind of plastic sweater between turmeric and bumblebee in color that, despite its yolky richness, yellow had always been her favorite, still made her queasy whenever she caught her reflection. Its scent was sharp and stale, like the donation bin from which it had emerged, no matter how many times she laundered it. Padmini had prepared her tea with whole milk and jaggery, and Anna left it in the bag to bob buoyantly, bittering the brew. Padmini had been Anna's social worker, but when the Gubruds understood that she was telling her things about her life, Indian things, Libbets had accused her, the sessions were quickly terminated. Padmini said that she was now Anna's friend, even though Anna was not allowed friends. So they met in her office, even late at night. They were about the same age, but Padmini had a keychain with a ballerina on it, which meant that she might dance, something Anna had never been able to do after the age of 10. According to all the Federal Reserve legal pads in Padmini's office, where they now sat, her husband was a lawyer in Omaha, and from the manner in which she often expressed "No, honey, put that down" into her cell phone on the way in, possibly had children of the correct age to stay at home. Still, she knew much more about Anna than Anna knew about her.
Hi.
Hi, Ben.
Well, Monica, first, it's great to be with you.
Thanks so
And
much.
congratulations on the novel publishing in the middle or June 23rd of this year. It's been a long time coming, and each new moment feels like a more exciting sort of door open as we pass through a publication.
Sure.
So I have a whole bunch of questions. I want to say hi to everybody. And full disclosure, I am on a family vacation, and I could say that I was flying here a few days ago, and had to do alongside Monica second pass notes on the novel, and I figured I'd do it on the plane. And of course, I was not shocked to yet again become completely engrossed in the novel, such that I didn't even have a pen and I was just reading and reading. Completely enveloped in the narrative, and sort of weirdly grateful to this novel for all that it holds within it. There's often you use the phrase kitchen sink novel in a negative way. I think that we would use the phrase kitchen sink novel in an entirely positive
No,
way.
thank you.
Everything is happening here, and there's so many emotions in it, and so many sort of feelings. There's so much sort of hilarity and complete sadness and complexity and distance, and togetherness. So I could easily ramble on about Nebraska for this half hour or more. I know this because I have done it with strangers repeatedly in the past over the years that we've been working on this novel, or that I've been editing. But instead, I'll stop and say, Monica, let's hear from you. I think if you can just tell us a bit about yourself in advance of more specific questions to ground.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, of course, my name is Monica. I am the author of Thieving Sun in Nebraska. I have been writing really most of my life on and off. But I would say that these novels really finally gave the opportunity for me to work very seriously on them. Otherwise, most of my background is in architecture, which has a lot of parallels, I think, to creative writing, but is also very kind of antithetical. And, certainly like we could talk about that. But yeah, I mean, both these projects, Thieving Sun, and probably especially Nebraska, are in different ways deeply personal to me. And as such, bringing them into the world is really something that seems a bit unreal. It seems something, and in a very, very good way. These are characters that I have been thinking about, living with, dreaming about, really for the 20 years that I have been working on Nebraska. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't be more honored to have worked with Ben on these books, who really is the perfect editor for Nebraska, especially. I mean, not just due to his patience, but also his creativity and thoughtfulness and ways in which I think he's really kind of allowed the novel to be perhaps even crazier than it might have been. I think a lot of editors try to like strap you in or like rein you in or say, no, stop. And of course, Ben has done that too. But, on the whole, I think the editorial process of Nebraska has really allowed me to allow the book to become itself. So that's a bit about me and my writing history, I suppose.
Uh, Thank you. I wasn't looking for.
No. Well, high praise.
Um,
And I'm sure I know you would never do that. So
but I have to sort of get into the novel. I have a would you rather question. Would you rather talk, because the mentioning architecture reminded me of what we had talked about sort of scaffolding of a novel, and then building a scaffolding around a novel and then letting this scaffolding come away with, and then you have the fully formed novel at the end of that process. And I wonder, so the would you rather is, would you rather talk about the novel's structure as it exists now in its completion, or would you rather talk about your favorite character, and telling us about that person and what's not in the book about them?
Oh, do you know what though? I think I could do it. I think I could do both, actually in this answer. So, I think the great thing, about this, editorial process also is that I think we reconsidered what the scaffolding and structure of the novel was going to be. Before there were more, headings and timestamps, more sort of like flags, it's like, we are here, it is this time. But rather what ended up happening is, so my favorite character's name is Jean-Louis Katz. Jean-Louis Katz is a Lacanian psychoanalyst. He provides a kind of mortar for the book. Several reasons. So this is a novel that is cardinally about four or maybe five Indian people, where Jean-Louis Katz is a Canadian-born French psychoanalyst, a Lacanian psychoanalyst, whose life dovetails with the story in many ways. And I think certainly we can talk about the nature of coincidence, but I would say that Jean-Louis Katz is the mortar that holds the facade, the brick facade together. Um, the second structural move, I think that we really implemented are the reconsideration of the footnotes. And those are a kind of, I wouldn't necessarily even call it I mean, I would call it a foundation, of course, but I think it's not the cardinal foundation of the book. I would liken it rather to pilotes. I would liken it rather to these kind of legs that a building can stand on, you know. And so the footnotes, written by another psychoanalyst and Jean-Louis Katz's nemesis, although I think it's more or less a one-sided nemesis. You know, I don't think Jean-Louis Katz has nearly as much beef with BX Roy as BX Roy does with Jean-Louis Katz. BX Roy forms the kind of pilotes really for the book. And so I think that these two new structural devices do things that are very interesting. And you know that perhaps I hadn't anticipated. Jean-Louis Katz initially had the same kind of parity as the four main characters, who are Anna, from whom we heard in the chapter, the excerpt I read, Anna's husband Prabir, and their two children, Nina and Neil. And so Jean-Louis Katz in his way kind of binds them in this way, in a manner, and they know each other through different ways, as strangers, as friends, as patient and therapist. Um, Whereas BX Roy provides a kind of intellectual support. So in short, Jean-Louis Katz is my favorite character. But certainly, I think the structure of the novel absolutely can be likened to a kind of a number of mid-century architectural devices, which I think are also appropriate to the novel, which also deals with the partition of India. And in you know, in one of my favorite exhibitions, which came out 3 years ago, it concerned the rebuilding of South Asia after the partition and the many different materials, especially concrete, that we tend to associate with mid-century architecture. The reinvention of concrete in India, for example. You know, so all this to say, I think that the structure of the novel and the characters have managed to coalesce in a really nice way that I don't think that they might have in the first few drafts.
What about you had mentioned the central family. So it's interesting to think about the family in terms of the
Yeah, absolutely.
concretization of the family, and then of course the breaking apart of the family in the novel.
Yes.
And the novel is about that. So maybe if you could tell us more about in in so many ways it's a family novel. If you could tell us more about family and what, in a sense, what you expect from those characters and what you expect the reader to discover in those characters.
You know, it's funny. I was having a conversation with some friends about that old Tolstoy quote, you know, happy families are all alike, unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. We thought about it and we decided that maybe the opposite is true. Maybe the unhappy families have more in common. Maybe there's more, you know, sort of strife. I mean, these kind of ongoing struggles might have more in common with each other, whereas maybe happy families have more time and space to go out and do different things, to think about other things. Whether the Chatterjees are an unhappy family or an happy or unhappy, I think that's actually a little bit relative. I think we would call them an unhappy family for this structure. So, I mean, I suppose I should disclose the premise of the novel. The matriarch, Anna Chatterjee, went to prison for 13 years, following the charge of involuntary manslaughter for the death of her son before a Metro North train in the early 1990s. The family is ruptured by several things. I mean, of course, the death of the youngest child, who is severely disabled, and then, of course, by Anna's imprisonment. If the death of the youngest son, for which his mother is certainly somewhat culpable, um, wasn't enough to rupture the family, certainly her absence, which begins when the Neil is the younger son, Nina is the eldest daughter. They're at a rather pivotal age when it happens. They're at the age when they are, just kind of about to enter the world and, see things on their own terms. So it's a primary time for the rupturing of the family structure. The family, at the beginning they're in New York City. The father, Prabir, is a Bangladeshi Scottish chemist, and he is a non-teaching researcher at Columbia University. So they are, living in New York. They are, having a fairly typical, second generation, and what's a typical immigrant life in New York City? Nobody can say really. I think it's a lot of different things, but it's not, so. Obviously, I think as we get to know them, we can see the way that things, are kind of bubbling under the surface. But what ends up happening is, they scatter geographically. They scatter emotionally. They scatter in every possible way, to the point where when the family go to retrieve Anna from the prison 13 years later, this kind of darkly comic thing happens where they're all kind of scattered, they're all kind of ruptured, they've all been everywhere else, and why would they know what she's up to? Why would they know what she's doing? Why would they know where she is?
I I want to come back to a bunch of things in there, but you had
Mm.
mentioned the Tolstoy, right? Tolstoy book.
Yes, yeah.
And it reminds me to ask you, I think maybe in the summer, a year and a half ago, I'd asked you
Mm.
about the books and authors you thought about
Oh, yeah.
while writing the book.
Mm.
Can you tell us about those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I think the nice thing, also maybe the tricky thing, about talking about a book that you've been working on for 20 years, is that you'll have read so many different things. And I guess I'm, relatively young enough, that, maybe my tastes and interests have changed. But I would say that the book's grandparents, if we will, are probably are very American. They are William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, and David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, who, to be fair, was probably too young to be considered a grandfather of any kind. But, so the footnotes, certainly this kind of sprawling American novel, with different narrators working with time in different ways. And entering each character's consciousness very much comes from this kind of American modernist tradition. And in that sense, it's kind of the inverse of Thieving Sun, which has a very American protagonist in a lot of ways and has more sort of like European influences. Nebraska has more American influences, but none of the characters are born in the USA, to quote to quote the title's namesake.
And the David Foster Wallace reminds me that we should probably talk more about the footnotes
Hmm.
in a couple of different ways. What your hope had been for these footnotes for the reader, and also how you think about the novel, and so
Hmm.
and the way you originally wanted to see them done.
Yeah, absolutely. So the footnotes role has certainly changed. I would say at first they were purely pragmatic because I found myself going into digressions. I found myself doing what I think and people blame Chat GPT for excessive M dashes, but I think we were all doing them anyway. It's kind of all of these asides. It's like, oh, by the way, this is important, and by the way, that's important, or parentheses and things like that, and then you would wind up with parentheses within parentheses and you realize, okay, this isn't math. I can't do this. So I started doing footnotes for actually very practical purposes. And then it emerged, well, what are the footnotes? Who is writing them? Are they me? And then I decided, no, that's not acceptable. So the footnotes were written by Jean-Louis Katz. They contained a lot of things about that Jean-Louis Katz would find important. There are a couple of vestiges from that. Like there's a bit about what, for example, like one of Nina's roommates, unbeknownst to Nina, was in the Guelph, Ontario marching band in school. I left that in because I think it's something that the current annotator, BX Roy, would have wanted to keep in. So BX Roy is the current annotator. BX Roy is a kind of an interesting character. He is actually trained as a neuropsychologist by Foundation. So he's a scientist. That's important because he becomes a Lacanian psychoanalyst almost purely because of these frustrating encounters with his frenemy, Jean-Louis Katz. So what he's doing with the novel is making corrections. He doesn't think that the novel is told in the way that it should be. He thinks what you're saying is important. It's not nearly as important as what I have to add to it. And so that's the current role of the footnote. The footnotes are a kind of corrective. And as BX Roy tells us in the prologue, kind of a moral duty. He doesn't want us to have the book without his annotations, his points of view. And some of them are poking fun at Jean-Louis Katz, but some of them are also some correctives about Indian culture, about the partition, about Bengal, because he's also a Bengali Indian psychoanalyst. And the other parts do consider the things that he finds important. He's a very kind of like grounded, very sort of analytical kind of person. He believes very much in dotting one's I's, crossing one's T's, citing one's sources.
I have a bunch of quick questions. What, well, and then I have a larger question at the end.
Sure.
But first, also just about colors.
Yes.
Well, first, also, I should say about the footnotes, I think you're now at over 500.
It seems like it, yeah.
So, and each one I can, each one more kind of perfectly wrought and sort of amazing than the last. There were moments where we were looking for more and less, and I think the main thing that we took away is like these footnotes are incredible and are stories unto themselves, and kind of obsessed with them. So we're very excited about those. But tell us about colors in the novel.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the very beginning, we heard about the significance of yellow for Anna. Yellow is important for many reasons, and some of them, even come up in the first paragraph. Certainly there are the associations with nature in the bumblebees. There are, with the sun. There are associations with cooking and the stain of turmeric that follows her where she goes, because certainly she still uses it. But also these more important symbolic aspects to it. The sun, the principles of luck, of gold, of a kind of optimism, a kind of brightness. And, all colors, of course, have their shadow side. Certainly we could talk about the bad things that yellow indicates. We talk about cowardice, we talk about jaundice, things like that. But one thing that I certainly very much took from, just even loving to read as a kid, was the idea that certain novelists were working with this kind of symbolism. Joyce certainly did that. Joyce assigned colors to some of it, to his characters. Georges Perec certainly did that with chapters in Life a User's Manual. There might be he outlines this in the kind of like 10 by 10 guide to Life a User's Manual. And so, ultimately, each of the six primary characters has a color. So Prabir, the patriarch, he was very active in Marxist politics as a young man, and he's very much prone to anger and has a very short fuse. So his color is red. The younger son, Neil, is very youthful all his life. He also has a very interesting phobia that I did borrow from myself. His color is green. The elder daughter, Nina, her color is blue. Jean-Louis Katz provides a kind of airiness, and as such, his color is white. BX Roy is very sort of grounded, textual, wants to assign weight, gravity, and lead. I don't know. I always think of lead when I think about this. It's kind of like heavy black metals, the kind of wrought iron. So BX Roy's color is black. But yes, so those are the roles of color. Plus, I mean, who doesn't love color? You know, I think color just rounds out a novel and can make it much more round, I suppose.
I almost, it's funny talking about color at the end of the process as opposed to the beginning. Next time, we'll
Yes, yeah, no, that'd be great.
Um, a completely different question is, we know you were able to do a photo shoot for Vogue on Monday.
Yeah, speaking of
Uh,
colors, yes.
yeah. And I wonder what that was like. I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, there's always that interplay between the author going away and writing the novel, and then the author coming out and being part of public, and ultimately, I can't shake the word commodification.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And 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 so I wonder what your experience was there. How that.
No, for sure. I mean, it's kind of like, like, as once a friend, was joking with me. He said, like, I don't even like it when commodities are commodified, you know. Um, and I certainly I can, I could say that, about the book. The book is a very sort of personal process for an artist. And my very first instinct when I got the offer was kind of like, oh God, no, public, no, no, bad, no, you know. On the other hand, I thought like, well, Vogue has a very nice literary tradition. Like a lot of authors, especially women authors, have been published and portrayed in Vogue in different ways. And also, I think just the nature of the shoot. I mean, we were in a bookshop, the wonderful Argosy bookstore on the East Side, but also I was meant to be a kind of frame character, if you will. Like I wasn't, modeling clothes. I wasn't trying to like sell anything. I was kind of in this bookshop, looking at things, looking around, thinking about things. And, you know, whatever thoughts I had about capitalism, it's not like that. It's not like I'm saying like, you know what, I'm 100% in favor. It's not like that. What I am saying though is kind of like, I think it's a nice way to kind of capture a moment in time, to kind of be a part of a conversation. It's kind of like, well, I was here on this day with, three amazing sisters who run the Argosy bookshop, that was, founded 100 years ago, and the young Indian model, it was also very nice that was an Indian model who happened to be there.
It's funny. The whole thing is sort of anyway, we're very much look forward to those pictures
Yeah,
and
no, thank you so much. I really appreciate this
yeah.
this conversation.
Uh,
It was a
thank you.
wonderful conversation, and I wish we could keep going on forever. Thank you so
Thanks so
much,
much,
Ben
Rachel.
and Monica. And now I'm going to introduce our second author-editor pair. Ashton Politnoff is a frequent contributor to Noon. His writing has also appeared in the Southwest Review, Conjunctions, New York Tyrant, Egress, and elsewhere. He is a former Division I tennis player, and his childhood coach was Robert Lansdorp, who is credited with coaching Pete Sampras, Tracy Austin, and Maria Sharapova. Politanoff's first novel, You'll Like It Here, was published by Dalkey Archive. He is an English professor at Cypress College. Rita Bullwinkle has called his new novel, Dad Had a Bad Day, a triumph, and said she gulped this book whole in a single sitting, which I can relate to. It will be published on May 19th and was acquired by Emily Bell. Emily is the editorial director of Astra House, where she publishes Ashton Politnoff, Abigail Sharp, Laurie Osland, Erin McGlock, Michelle Orange, and Nikki Irvice, among others. Previously, she was the head of editorial at Zando, where she edited Lydia Kiesling's Mobility and Holly Wilson's Kitten Tits, among other titles. She also curated and published the Atlantic Editions, a publishing partnership with the Atlantic magazine. Prior to Zando, Emily spent a decade at FSG, most recently as an executive editor and the director of the paperback original line FSG Originals, which launched early work from Amelia Gray, Catherine Lacey, and Laura Vandenberg. And now I will pass it over to Ashton to read from Dad Had a Bad Day.
Thank you for that introduction, Rachel. All right, here we go. My wife was still at work. My son didn't want to go to the park, but I needed to get outside. He had a fever, so I gave him a glass full of ice cubes and told him to suck on them during the drive. His school wouldn't take him back until the fever was gone. I drove in a direction until we found a park. The park was one we hadn't been to. The grass around the playground was tall, uncut, and I followed him down the concrete path. The sky was orange with only a few clouds as the sun set in the distance. A girl was on the swings. She was self-sufficient, tucking her legs behind her and straightening them forward, building momentum. My son was not self-sufficient. He still needed me to push him. The swing the girl was on was silent on the way up, but it sounded like a bird's chirp on the way down. It was rusty. The girl was alone. My son climbed some steps leading to a slide, and I took a seat on a wooden bench with chipped green paint. Directly across from me, behind the playground, were two tennis courts. They looked slick and worn from use, and the net sagged down the middle. On one side of the nearest court was a young man, a towhead. My guess would be 18. And on the other side was an older man, presumably his father. The young man took his racket back for a forehand with a quick shoulder turn, all the time in the world, his feet making tiny little squeaks as he moved. He sent the yellow ball in a clean arc deep to the other side of the court. The father with the sports sunglasses was competent. The rally continued. The constant percussion of the ball being struck with trained perfection by the young man sent a vibration through me. I found myself walking toward the fence, the sound of the ball, the flick of the wrist, feet stepping forward like daggers, then tumbling back like leaves, the ball hailing and then collapsing missile-like onto the hard court. Then I heard a cry behind me. It was my son.
Thanks, Ashton. That was excellent. It's a perfect introduction to the book because it sets us up both the reader up both to understand that this book is going to be largely about tennis, but also about fathers and sons, Ned, who is the narrator, and his son, but also Ned and his father. I should set it up for the viewers here that this book is from Ned's perspective. You learn over time that he was a exceptional tennis player, kind of a prodigy as a kid, played Division I tennis, but stopped in the middle of the season, injury, but also ended kind of badly, quite badly, with some not great behavior from Ned, which is not unusual for tennis players because it is incredibly psychically taxing to be a tennis player. Ned loses his job at some point, and he is sort of tasked with taking care of his 6-year-old son, who we are introduced to here, who he has like a healthy amount of ambivalence towards, which I really appreciate. You don't see that all the time in fiction these days. Just kind of like, yeah, you're all right, but maybe not the person I want to spend all my time with. However, Ned has to because he's unemployed and his wife is the breadwinner. And it's summertime, so he's supposed to take care of his kid and look for a job. Ned doesn't want to do either of these things. So he instead joins a tennis club, the tennis club that he grew up going to, and commits his whole sad self to getting good again, and also organizing the sort of men's rec league there. And through that, we see this cast of incredible characters of men who just need something else in their lives, and they are hysterical. And also just like incredibly real, even though they are sort of caricatures. And I'll stop talking about this book that I love so deeply and think is so funny, and ask Ashton to tell us a little bit about how he came to Ned, because Ashton is like the nicest, most decent person, and Ned is a piece of shit. So tell us about that.
Well, thanks for that wonderful intro to the book, and for publishing my work, Emily, and working with me. So I grew up playing tennis. I played college tennis. Played tennis very seriously as a junior. It was my whole life. Every weekend was a tournament. I quit tennis for some time after college. I took like a 14-year hiatus. And then we happened to rejoin my local club. And one night I was sitting in the jacuzzi. It was just the gym membership. And on center court, there was a Division I prospect warming up for I think it was like the semis of a doubles tournament that was being played at my club. And just, hearing the sound of the ball, just like the opening pages of the book, I was like, man, I miss that. I really miss that. And then, on a whim, I decided the next week, I'm going to start playing again. And first, was hitting on the public courts, and then decided, hey, I want to, up my membership at the club so I can play at the club that I grew up playing at. Um, I eventually played league tennis, which this book is very preoccupied with, a men's league. And I had some, I didn't react well. I lost the doubles match, and I remember feeling like really bummed about it, you know? I'm like, gosh, where is this feeling coming from? And at that point, I think I'd already published or You'll Like It Here, or I was starting to work on something else. My agent, Chris Fishback, loves tennis too. And I'm like, maybe I should think about writing a tennis novel. And I thought, this men's league, a character, like myself, will amplify the drama, loses his job, trying to find his purpose. I think there are existential concerns in the book, most definitely. What a great container for this and to potentially explore my complicated relationship with tennis. Um, and I'm sure maybe we'll talk about this more, but I grew up with a lot of other tennis players, and I don't think my relationship to tennis, the complicated nature, is unique. I know a lot of other, guys I grew up with who feel similar. So yeah, that's kind of what spawned, the seed of the idea. And then like finding Ned's voice took me a while. Took three different times, 6 months apart. And then when I landed on those opening pages, I'm like, this is the voice right here. And then I just, I had a rough outline of where I wanted to go, but kind of went in a different direction ultimately. And having this sort of unhinged character for me, I think it was a good way to explore sort of social norms at like a tennis club, social norms about what we should be doing as adults in society, as parents, and a lot of TV and film characters that I appreciated or thought might be interesting fodder. It was like Colin Farrell's character in True Detective season two, kind of plays this, shitty dad. Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood, with that, he's kind of a surrogate father, I believe, in that movie. But those kind of stuck with me, and I just thought, hey, there's something here that, to explore.
Yeah, yeah. When you just said that, I just thought of I can't remember his name, but not that Ned ends up being like a meth meth dealer, but Breaking Bad, like someone who has this like
Right.
family life that like
Yes.
from the outside perspective is sort of you know pretty nice. Like, why aren't you happy? And you're like, well,
Right.
because there's a lot going on inside. I too am a tennis player. I played Division 3 college tennis, not nearly at the level of Ashton, but did stop for, like 12, 13, 14 years and started playing again, like, I don't know, 7 years ago. And it is wild how much it like just like I thought I had left it behind, and then it like just comes in and becomes quite an obsession. And yeah, those first losses at the beginning, you're like, this is why am I doing this to myself? But then you get better at losing. And that's
Right.
it's an important thing to come to terms with in this life. Well, so you talked a little bit about starting it and sending it to your agent, and when it was submitted to me, it was about half the length that it is now, which I kind of loved, but I was like, there's so much more like story here. And can you talk about that process of like taking it from 25,000 words to 50, and where you had the most fun doing the expanding?
Yeah, so I've my tendency, I would say, in the last 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to work with Diane Williams at Noon and, been really focusing on very concise fiction, language driven, you know, more than just language though. Like, I know Diane values high drama. And so that was an aesthetic, has always been an aesthetic concern for me in terms of, am I accomplishing not just a good story, but also, on the sentence level, is there's something here that's working. Um, but yeah, like, once Emily received the book, I had some distance from it. And then, as I was thinking about the book more in our first meeting, there's just so much left to be explored or things that I wanted to dive back into. And of course, Emily had great ideas as well. And so we took it from there and expanded it, and it didn't feel like it was forced. I had a lot of joy working on those pages. Yeah, and then in terms of the most fun things to write about, I would definitely say like the league politics,
Yeah.
like the politics within the team. I wasn't like setting out necessarily to, write about masculinity in some trite way. But I think, having played in a competitive environment as a junior, but also now as an adult, and seeing some of the behavior, obviously, there's people that are very even keeled out there as well. So I don't want to cast a broad light on everyone, but yeah, just kind of observing some silly behavior, and in that behavior, like even though the intention might have been a different effect, actually the result is something quite different and comical,
Yeah.
and performative. And so I think that was really fun to play with. And sort of like, but also more seriously, this perseverance on like scores and ratings and rankings. And now we have this UTR system. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people talking about that. And, as a junior growing up, I had some coaches that didn't ask me, but, often a question was like at the lesson was, how did you do last week? And what's your rank now? And, it's like that, like, is kind of psychologically can be a little tough.
Yeah.
So, I think the book definitely leans towards that as we progress.
Yeah. Um, True story, there was a fist fight at my club last year
Oh
among
my
like
gosh.
between members on the court, like in a
Wow.
social match. I was like, this is wild. Also the irony that like, you're at like a tennis club, like ostensibly it's supposed to be,
Totally.
like polite company and sort of, waspy, and like people are acting like animals, like total animals.
I hated that growing up as a kid and seeing like a trailer for a movie or something, and then they have like a tennis scene and it's portrayed in this really fluffy, like cutesy way. And like that's not, yeah, at least not my experience of the
Yeah.
game at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think at the professional level, it's like it's changed a lot. Obviously, like Andre
Yeah.
Agassi is like the bad boy of tennis who
Right.
kind of like was the beginning of that tide shift. But it is fun to see. But now I feel like we had like a moment where people were behaving badly, and now everyone's so sorry. Now I'm just talking about tennis, but everyone's so like media trained. Everyone's so media trained, and I'm just like,
Right.
someone say something like controversial. And I
I
mean, well, we
agree.
have Ostapenko to do that for us, but otherwise,
Right.
sorry, this is a tendency I have with Ashton, is to just start talking about tennis, because it is, I never intended to publish a novel about tennis because I didn't think the tennis writing would be good enough. This is a good segue back to the book. The tennis writing in this book is exceptional. I mean, we get a little bit at the reading that you just gave us, but throughout, like both the psychological aspects of playing tennis, but then also just the like physicality of it and the in-scene moments of when he's um, playing, and shot selection and strokes, etc. So if you like that kind of like technical writing, viewers, about tennis, it is so good. I do think that there are novelists out there who are like, oh, tennis, like that, I'll start writing about that, but they do not know what they're talking about. And I feel the same way about books about restaurants and restaurant culture too. I'm like, if you haven't like lived it for years and years, like you really shouldn't be writing about it, because it shows. One other thing that's kind of an interesting character in this book is the place, is Redondo Beach, which I know Ashton grew up there, and his last book, You'll Like It Here, was about Redondo Beach. And I guess maybe can you talk a little bit about that, like the way the place works itself into the novel?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I ever like name Redondo Beach in this book, but it's definitely in my imagination, like geographically as I write the novel. That's very much the world that Ned is in, is the South Bay. And I had a writing professor, Steve Cooper, great writer, and he said to us once, a place doesn't really exist until it's written about well. And, I took that to heart when I heard it. And the South Bay, Redondo Beach is effectively where I grew up since 8 years old. So yeah, I think it's been, a world that I've wanted to write about. And, like in my early 20s, when I had aspirations to write, I was talking to a friend and I was like, gosh, I want to travel and really, write about these far-flung places. And he's like, why don't you just write about, Redondo, where you're from? What's wrong with that? And, that kind of, made sense to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh no, I just interrupted you, but I like it. It's kind of like, I don't know, a throwbacky, just to have sort of to be like a very specific like regional writer. Not to say that you shouldn't write about any place that you want to in the future, but
Yeah.
I do love that like you kind of can't shake the place, and there's more to observe and more to write about there. Speaking of sort of throwbacky, the voice here, we mentioned Cheever and but I'm curious if there are writers who like really influence, and you mentioned Diane Williams, but writers or books that really influenced your approach when you were writing this book.
I was reading a lot of Iris Murdoch at the time. I think while I was working on the novel, I was reading The Sea, and I just finished reading a couple other books from her. And so her, approach to, you know, um, the dark comedic aspect of her writing, the attention to language, definitely appealed to me. But I also assigned this book by Edouard Louis, the French writer who killed my father, to my students. And it's a memoir, almost a manifesto, I would say, if you haven't read it. But yeah, formally, I thought that book was really interesting and just really raw and kind of had this raw, intimate feeling. And he also works with really short text and kind of creates this accumulative feel. And so that's somebody, whose work I've been thinking about a lot. But yeah, Cheever's The Swimmer. And, also just like film and, my father was in film and TV, my grandfather was. So I was exposed to, great movies from a young age, probably some things I shouldn't have been watching. Grew up watching Scorsese and a lot of, his, and I love his movies. And, most recently, I think about Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal and kind of this obsessiveness that takes over. And I think there's a kinship between Ned, maybe not quite as dark in that character.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I was thinking about. And then also, like you mentioned, like the language of tennis. And, you know, I think that's why it was hard for me to write about initially too, is just in terms of like, how do I communicate like the sport to the reader, the average reader that doesn't play tennis or doesn't know the game that well. But I think about like Michael Ondaatje and his pursuit of the language of the expert. And I really wanted to kind of uphold that in terms of the vernacular that I use and that kind of language.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job in my estimation, for whatever that's worth. So Ned in this novel, if you haven't figured out, he unhinged is a word that Ashton used. He does really kind of he unravels over the course of the novel, and there are things pushing him in different directions and sort of expediting that unraveling. But his relationship with his wife is interesting, and she's pretty absent throughout because she's working and she travels for work, and but uh she's not a priority for Ned, and I'm curious if your wife has read this novel and what she said.
Um, So fortunately, my wife, she works in TV and film as well, and is more on the producing side. So she works with a lot of writers. And so she really kind of understands like, creative work and, where that might be coming from and sort of like distancing the author from the work. And so, this is all to say she read the book and yeah, she thought, it was quite humorous, but also, she liked it. And I mean, I remember one of the first things she said in terms of tone, it was like, yeah, this, I could see this as like an A24 film. So that
Yeah.
was sort of her reaction to it, just with her like film TV cap on. But yeah, and then she read the latest version and, really liked it. No complaints. I wasn't in trouble or anything like that. So yeah.
um well, one of the sort of catalysts for Ned's unraveling is his kind of obsession with this player that he grew up with named Roland, who was his a real friend to him in the juniors, and Roland had a troubled home life, as did Ned, but troubled in different ways. And Roland reappears at the club, and Ned tries desperately to kind of recruit him to play on the team, because he loves him, but also Roland is an exceptional tennis player, if a bit of a head case. And then Roland kind of disappears, and Ned is searching for him, as he's searching for himself. And I'm just curious how you came up with that character. I know you said, you grew up with obviously lots of tennis players and many of them head cases, but Roland is very, I don't know, he's just very specific. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about how you came up with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was talking about this with a tennis dad the other night, who's got a son who's playing now competitively at 13, and was I've been kind of haunted by, different people that I came across growing up playing tennis who I was friends with or knew that sort of went astray. And they were very high level competitive players with lots of promise. And, um, so I think that has been something that I've been thinking about since, young adulthood, like what happened with, XYZ and why. And, again, it wasn't just one player, it was several, homelessness, one passed away from an overdose. You know, Another one, I think has unfortunately, you know, um, done some crime and, and sort of like, how was the pressures of tennis and kind of these parents that maybe were living vicariously through their kids a contributing factor to that? How much of it was like undiagnosed, like mental illness? Um, but yeah, that sort of was a huge impetus for the Roland character.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, you do see with youth sports. But what I like about this is it's not actually a book about youth sports, and Ned is not trying to live vicariously through his child. He's like
Yeah.
trying to regain
Right.
his or chase that feeling that he experienced himself, which I like. But and also the other men on the team, and you see, and to me that's kind of more, I mean, you see the influences of you know and the story of Ned's stepfather who pushed him very hard. So you see where it comes from, but you also see like just the way these men put this ridiculous pressure on themselves for recreational tennis. Like nobody's getting paid, you know. But
Totally.
it is remarkable the way it becomes people's like entire identity. And I don't know that there's another sport like for adults where, or at least I haven't seen it, you know,
Yeah.
where people, yeah.
I mean, I had early on when I was playing league tennis, there's a doubles match. I was one of the players, and there was a level of contentiousness that I've never experienced. Like even in college tennis, Division I college tennis or junior tennis, it was just wild.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
It's really human behavior on full display.
Yeah.
So for all of you out there watching, if you would like to see some real bad behavior, both on the tennis court and on the parenting level, I encourage you to get a copy of Dad Had a Bad Day, which is an incredible package. It's a beautiful paperback. You can carry it around with you. It's going to be coming out shortly before Father's Day, so it's maybe an unconventional gift for a father, but I think a lot of parents will feel very seen by this book. I certainly did when I read the pages early on. But yeah, I think maybe that's where we stop. Thank you, Ashton. It was great to
Thank
talk.
you so much, Emily.
I also felt very seen as a parent who does not know a thing about tennis. I will say this made me want to learn more, but has a little bit of something for every kind of reader. So thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to Monica Datta, Ashton Politnoff, Ben Schrank, and Emily Bell for these fascinating conversations. A reminder that you can request digital copies of both Nebraska and Dad Had a Bad Day on NetGalley and Edelweiss. If you prefer physical, please email us at ahpublicity@astrahouse.com. And we can't wait for you to dive into these amazing novels. Thanks again and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Good to see you.